Everybody asks us all the time, is the LS stuff really worth it? And it is. It's absolutely, it's worth it. Hi, we're here today to talk about a 62 Corvette that we're just finishing up. And I mean finished, it's tested, the suspension is tuned, everything's ready to go. The owner's gonna take it next week. What this car represents is what we really like to build. When this is on the ground, it looks like a 62 Corvette. There's not radical changes made to the body. There's not even radical changes made to the interior. However, there's a lot of changes, which I'll point out some of the things. Most of what we're after is drivability and performance. And we've achieved that with the Morrison chassis, the LS3 engine, and a 6-speed transmission. Morrison is our go-to for sure on chassis. We'll talk about that a little bit. I'll walk under the car, spend a couple minutes before we go for a ride in it. And as we ride in the car, I'll point out some of the characteristics of the chassis that make it so interesting and so worth the investment. When you're building these cars, they've become extremely expensive. And to maximize your investment, using something like this makes more sense than actually trying to retrofit or polish a turd, for lack of better words, using the original chassis, particularly with a C1 Corvette. The C2 Corvette's a little better. You can make that better without going as crazy as we have here. A C1 is a terrible car. It's a horrible car, beautiful to look at. But with what we've done to it, I think with the driving impressions that I'll give you, you'll see that the Morrison chassis really makes the thing work. So underneath the car, we'll just start taking a couple looks at the features that Morrison provides us. The chassis actually is relatively painless to swap with this body. I mean, they've done a really good job incorporating the factory core support. This is an independent rear suspension chassis, and it's worth every dollar. It does take a little bit more to install it, but it's not even alarming the amount of extra work. You've got to do some cutting and a little bit of fiberglass work, but it's not that big a deal. The front suspension has got coilover shocks. We use the Willwood brakes. It's a 6-piston caliper. Sorry, I lied, 4-piston caliper. 14-inch brake. The car is light, it stops really well. This car doesn't really have a good option for power brakes, so we use a manual brake option. The wheels that you see here are shot wheels. I think the style really looks good. The shot wheels first class. It's the workmanship is exquisite. They're not the quickest delivery in the world, but it's worth the wait, believe me. The LS engine requires a different oil pan, which Holly provided us with that. The headers come from Morrison directly. Somebody makes them for them. I'm not sure who it is, but it's a stainless steel header. We fabricated the rest of the exhaust system, which you can see that as we walk through the car. And it's a Tremec 6-speed transmission, which is a really nice transmission for high RPM shifts. We'll walk to the back of the car now where you can see the IRS. Okay, so we're in the back of the car. We're focusing again on the chassis. This has got the IRS option, as I mentioned, instead of a straight axle. It's worth the extra money. The ride quality is amazing. It hooks up, it handles, it does everything better than the straight axle. As you can see in the back, it's got half shafts with CV joints, not U joints like the old Corvette stuff. It's got a very large differential. It's good to about 800 horsepower, which we're not even close. We're about 430 horsepower. Again, the Willwood disc brake, 14-inch diameter rotor, and it's 4-piston caliper. You can look underneath the car. You can see the exhaust work that we've done, all the TIG welded stainless. You see the chassis, how stiff and tight the chassis is, and you can tell when you drive the car is like a rock, it really is. The other thing you can see when you look under this car, and he'll take pictures and start showing this, is all of the insulation we put where there's heat sources. We're not trying to do the bottom of the car so that it's, you know, base clear and beautiful, so the first time you drive it, it's messed up. What we've gone after is function. I mean, it's like looking at the bottom of a new Corvette or even a Ferrari or something. There's a lot of insulation on the car. We've gone after quality of the drive, not necessarily, you know, the 3 or 4 people that own these things that have a lift in their garage and they can show their friends how pretty the bottom of the car is. We really emphasize driving the car, and we emphasize that we provide a car that's been tuned and driven at a high rate of speed, and it goes straight, and it stops straight, and it runs good, and it shifts gears, everything that you take for granted. And they're so frequent that we get builds from the auctions or from other people that we have to straighten all these things out. Again, we take extra time in doing that. One thing you can see here too is the innovation in the exhaust system. I say that sarcastically, I know, because it's the same exhaust system that's on a C2, but it just works really good on the 62. You can see what we did to get the exhaust out to the back of the car as well. So under the hood is very simple again. It does have the LS3, it's 430 horsepower GM crate engine. It's unmodified, it has been custom tuned. We custom tune everything that we get out of the box from GM. They run, they're fine, but our tuner can make them better. We do modify a little bit a lot of times. The valve cover, which is the coil covers, we put something in it to make it look a little more conventional and hide the coils. That's just our preference. We've got a couple of cars coming up where you see we've done some other things a little more elaborate, but you can take a look at it. It's very basic. So we're just driving around in the industrial park right now. They're taking some pictures of the car from another vehicle. But even right now, when you're just driving around at 30 miles an hour, or just driving through the industrial park, the ride quality is so much better than what you would have normally seen in with most chassis, period, let alone the original car. The original car is really bad. The 6-speed works very well. We did have some work done to the 6-speed. It has carbon synchros and some other things done to it to make it shift at 7,000 RPM, which we'll probably do before this ride's over. The car is extremely quiet right now, and that's a factor of all the insulation and all that's in it. The mufflers that we've chosen for this car, because of fitment, is Borla. We either use Borla or MagnaFlow. They both give a real nice sound. And this one's really pleasant to drive at a normal speed. It doesn't have a drone, which is really annoying. And as far as the performance goes, it's a full 2.5-inch exhaust system. It'll get up and go without any problem. I'm sure it's still making 430 without any problem at the crankshaft. The car doesn't have rattles. It's just a really pleasant car to drive. I mean, the input with the steering wheel is wonderful. Where you ask the car to go, it goes. I mean, when you hit the brakes, it stops right now. It should. I mean, it's only a 3,200-pound car. You can see the modifications that we've done to the seats. I'm 6 feet tall and weigh 190 pounds, and I'm actually quite comfortable in the car. I would not be in a standard C1 Corvette. One thing that's really impressive about the IRS is its straight line performance and its ability to get traction. This car has relatively small tires on it because, as I mentioned before, we still have a convertible top, which pretty much limits us on what we can do as far as tire fit. So even with the small tires, the thing hooks up surprisingly well. I'll step on it pretty hard in first gear right now. As you can see, it has plenty of power and moves pretty good. I'm not an advocate of real high horsepower. Everybody talks to me about their twin turbocharged 1400 horsepower and all this other nonsense. I mean, this is 430 horsepower, and this car will absolutely shit and get. There's no traction aid in these cars. There's no ABS system. It's a very old school, rude and crude car, and Most people don't even need to be driving something with this performance, let alone getting crazy with 1,000 horsepower, so on and so forth. That's not to say we wouldn't build it if we were asked, but I would do my best to talk people into doing something a little more moderate. We do have another one of these that we're getting ready to build, same chassis. It'll utilize the LS7, which I believe is 556 horsepower. So that's another 120 horsepower over what we've got here. That car, we're not going to have a convertible top in it, so we'll be able to utilize a lot more tire. So we're going to go out onto the bigger roads a little bit. Everybody asks us all the time, is the LS stuff really worth it? And it is. It's absolutely, it's worth it. I tell people all the time, the LS stuff makes more power, it doesn't leak oil, it doesn't overheat, and it always runs, and it doesn't care about what kind of gasoline you're putting in it. So we'll let them get ahead of us a little bit. We're going to go onto a 6-lane road where we can step on it some. The car was just effortless to drive. It wanted to go straight. It didn't want to try and hurt me. You can't believe some of the things that we experience fixing other people's mess. That's one thing we do. Probably 60% of our business is straightening out other people's cars. I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but we have a few people that work for us that's all they've done is tune high-dollar race cars for big race teams, which helps me out a lot in my own personal stuff. But it also gives us the ability to build something like this. Clarence spent a lot of time on it. We just changed the spring rates in the back of the car. We reset the height of the car and realigned it again because he didn't quite like the way it was handling. And I'll tell you right now, it's just freaking outstanding. So I'm gonna make a little run again. There's a lot of traffic, but we've got a couple more cars coming up. The Fairlane is just about finished. That'll be something really over the top. Another Morrison chassis, custom engine that we built in-house. That car is really outrageous. Brenda's been waiting for years to have this car. It's going to be something spectacular. And we have another 67 427 Vette that we took apart and made into a street rod, believe it or not. Only in Naples do you take apart a numbers matching 427 Corvette and turn it into a hot rod. But that car is maximum suspension modifications and a 490 horsepower LS3 with a 5-speed transmission. So we'll do the same thing with this. Sometime in the near future, we'll take one to Sebring and do a video racing around Sebring. And we might do it with the 67 Vette. I don't know, but stay tuned for that.
Performance and restoration is what we do.